Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today is going to be another one of my individual scouting reports for the 2022 NBA draft. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at New Zealand Breakers' very own Ousmane Dieng. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. Moving on, we do have some stats to cover regarding Ousmane Dieng, as he is 18 years old as of the making of this video. I believe he won't turn 19 until May of this year, so still extremely young. He does stand at about 6 feet 10 inches, weighs about 215 pounds, and has a 7-foot wingspan. Impressive physical profile for the young forward, especially when you consider that weight. You know, a lot of the other prospects that we've covered that are around that 6'9", 6'10", 6'11 height typically aren't as big as Ousmane is, and even though he is definitely on the slimmer side of 215 pounds, right? When you watch him on the court, you can still tell that he's kind of developing into his own body. Still, you like to see him carry 215 pounds. That's extremely impressive, and he's still able to hold his own a decent amount on the court. And also that 7-foot wingspan. It's not as big as you would like it to be, but still, just given how big he is, just having a 7-foot wingspan is really good enough. So very, very impressive physical profile for Ousmane Dieng. And as for the on-court stats, this is his first year playing for the New Zealand Breakers, where he did average 8.87 points, 3.17 rebounds, 1.09 assists, and 0.6 steals per game. The counting stats don't necessarily look all that impressive, but you have to take into the context that he did start off the year pretty poorly. For those of you that don't know, Ousmane Dieng was a projected top 20, top 15 pick by a lot of people coming into the year. Was extremely bad for the beginning of the season. I'm not going to lie. He was terrible for a majority. I wouldn't say a majority, a good amount of the season. But lately, the past couple months, I'd say the last two months, month and a half, he's really taken off, really gotten comfortable, and that's something that we will obviously discuss later on in the video. So even though the counting stats don't look great, as well as the efficiency numbers, right? He's shooting 40% from the field, 67% from the free throw line, and 27% from three. You have to take into account that, again, players overseas don't necessarily have the best counting stats, and their efficiency can be hit or miss, but you also have to keep in that extra context with Ousmane, considering the fact that he really just started to break out the past month or two, and that has really driven his stock as high as it has the past, again, month and a half, almost 2 months. Moving on to the strengths of Ousmane Dieng as a prospect, first up, I do want to talk about his pick and roll play, where, again, you have to keep in mind that a lot of these strengths are really strengths that have occurred over the past, again, month and a half, 2 months, but really through this period of play, his pick and roll playmaking and just ball handling and just overall pick and roll play as just a creator has just been so impressive. He's just done such a great job of handling the ball, feeling out pressure. He does a great job of retreating out of pressure as well. A lot of times when teams will either hedge or ice the pick and roll, he does a great job of kind of backing out of them, knowing a good job of, even if he does back out of them, he does a great job of seeing, either men open in the strong side corner, the weak side corner, or hitting, his big man rolling to the basket. And that's just so impressive to see that again out of an 18-year-old, and especially a player who looked as raw as Ousmane Dieng did, for the beginning to middle half of the year. So to really see him come out of his own and be able to handle the ball and really efficiently run an offense, I would say efficiently for him. This New Zealand team is pretty awful, to be honest, but, still seeing Ousmane Dieng be able to effectively run an offense is extremely impressive. Again, you consider his age, and also his height helps him a lot. Being 6'10", it just allows him to see over defenses a lot and just be able to pinpoint, where the open man is. You consider like smaller ball handlers, maybe a guy like Hugo Bess in his own teammate, for example, who's an awesome passer in his own right, who's a guy I will get into in very soon in his own video. But Ousmane Dieng, unlike, Hugo Besson is 6'3", right? So Ousmane Dieng can see just certain passes, certain passing lanes that Hugo just can't, just because of his height, right? So again, he just does such a great job of just hitting playmakers, hitting shooters, hitting open players, and that leads me into my next bullet point, where he's just such a good playmaker. Again, as I stated, he's just able to make cross-court passes with one hand. He does a great job of attacking the rim, and he's able to make wraparound passes to open shooters in the corner with one hand. And again, as I stated here, he's just an unselfish player. He's going to make the open play. He's going to make the right play all the time. And what I really like about him is that he's able to deceive his man a lot of times. And he's just, again, this is all has occurred, within the last 2 months, month and a half, but he's just done such a great job of just recognizing that he can manipulate defenders however he wants, and he does that through his eyes. A lot of times he'll be looking at the roll man, and then he'll hit the man in the corner, or vice versa, and you can just really see his level of confidence just growing, and he kind of recognizes that, he's just this level of talent, and he's just able to do whatever he wants on the court. So be able to see him grow as a playmaker and a pick and roll ball handler, and really just a lead initiator at 6'10", being 18 years old, that's extremely impressive. And moving on to another aspect of his game, which kind of plays into his pick and roll play a little bit, which is his self creation ability, which is legit. It's real. I expect him to be a little bit raw. We'll get into that later on in the video when he does get into the NBA. But right now, his self creation, he's shown some crazy flashes right now. He does a lot of between the legs cross hezzies, and he does a great job of manipulating defenses. He likes to do what I like to call the AI exaggerations, where AI had the move where he would like exaggerate the crossover before he did it. Ousmane Dieng does a lot of that. He kind of uses that exaggeration with his between the legs, and in front of him his crossovers where he'll put together a move, right. He'll go between the legs, kind of do the AI exaggeration crossover, and then he'll exaggerate again, kind of hezzy, and then sidestep and hit and knock it down a three. And again, he's 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan. So it's not like there's a lot of players out there, especially in the Australian in the NBA in the Australian NBL league, that can really compete with him and effectively defend him, right? And again, you just don't see this level of self creation out of 6'10" of 18-year-olds. Some players that I could compare even physically to this draft, a guy like Jeremy Sohan, and Jeremy Sohan's a great player in his own right, but Jeremy Sohan can never even dream of doing the things that Ousmane Dieng can. That level of self creation, especially from behind the arc. And again, he just looks so poised, so confident out there on the court right now. And again, just him being able to just get to a shot whenever he wants to, and the fact that he does have this level, these different moves in his bag to get to, is just so impressive, and it just bodes well for his translation to the NBA level if he manages to keep this up for the rest of the season for the New Zealand Breakers. And another part of his offensive game that's really working for him right now is his floater. He likes to get to it in pick and roll play where he attacks downhill, and then he'll kind of slow down a little bit, especially if he doesn't have a clear lane to the path. He likes to hit that right-handed floater, and he can even adjust to it through contact. I've seen a number of plays where he's even gotten an and one at times where, the big man or strong side defender will kind of slide into his path when he's attacking downhill after a pick and roll, and then they'll kind of not necessarily foul him, but they'll have their hand up and they'll kind of come down on him a little bit, and he's able to just kind of double clutch and hit that right-handed floater. And the fact that he's able to do that is extremely, extremely impressive. Again, we're talking about a 6'10" player who's able to make high-level pick and roll reads, create his own shot, and be able to knock down floaters through traffic that are contested. That's extremely impressive, and the fact that he does have that floater bodes well for him being able to have that in between game, so that he's not necessarily just a finisher on the inside and shooter from outside. So the fact that he does have that floater kind of bodes well for him, being an effective ball handler at the NBA level, because to be an effective ball handler at the NBA level, you have to be able to self create, and having that mid range scoring ability, even adds to your capabilities, right? It just adds to your threat, adds to you being a threat as a scorer. So to see Ousmane Dieng have that floater in his bag with that right hand is extremely impressive. And my last bullet point on his strengths offensively is his ability to attack the rim. And even though, again, as I state, it's still a little bit of a work in progress, he's shown great flashes of being able to not only get to the rim, but be able to finish through contact. Again, he does have, certain aspects of his finishing to work on. But overall, you like the tenacity. And again, he's just so confident right now that he's just going, and he's not necessarily thinking too much. And you kind of saw that earlier in the season where he was kind of lost, wasn't necessarily comfortable in his own body. But he just looks so impressive out there on the floor right now, just being able to attack, and he just looks fearless attacking the rim. Even if he doesn't necessarily hit the shot or he gets blocked or whatnot, it's still awesome to see him have that confidence and just be like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to go to the rim and I'm going to try to score. And, again, that's just not something we saw from him earlier in the year, to be able to see him just get to the rim. And he not only attack the rim, but get to the rim at will, again, with that handle, with how tall he is, how big he is, and he's pretty quick as well. There's not a lot of people in the NBL that can really guard him. So to see him have that confidence to just attack the rim at will is a great sign to see, and I think it's something that bodes well for his development as soon as he gets to the NBA level. However, moving on to the defensive side of the floor, I love him on the defensive side of the floor, and I think he might be a better defensive prospect than an offensive prospect by the time he gets into the NBA, because he's done such a great job as a pick and roll ball handler, whether that be guarding guards or wings. And he has good lateral footwork. It's not great, There are times where he can be a step slow. You know, for your taller players, you like to see them have a bit more of like jittery feet on ball, and that kind of bodes well for their lateral footwork, so that they're kind of like always moving, right? Osman's footwork, it's quick, but it's a bit slow. It's not like his feet aren't jittery, but he just responds to defenders rather than dictating where. Excuse me. He responds to ball handlers' moves rather than dictating where they're going. But he does a great job of just recovering a lot of times just because of his length. I've seen a number of plays where a ball handler will cross him over, and he'll be crossed for a second, but he'll just be able to recover just because of his length. And he'll just send the shot flying from behind. So again, that's just so impressive, and I think that will translate to the NBA level again, considering the fact that he is 18 years old. He's still growing out his body. You figure he's going to get a little bit quicker. He's going to get smarter. That length is only going to bode well for him at the next level. And again, he has just such a good motor. The ability to just recover, and he's never necessarily out of a play. He's always going to try to get back in the play and try to make an effort. And again, you love to see that level of motor and just that level of ability from an 18-year-old. And I think that bodes really well for him being able to guard some guards. I'm not expecting him to be able to guard, Steph Curry or anything like that, but I expect him to maybe hold, some backup point guards early on in his career. But definitely for those twos, maybe some threes, wings overall, I expect him to be able to be a plus defender on those level of players later on in his career when he starts to hit his peak. However, moving on to another side of his defense, which I really like, is his weak side rim protection is amazing. He does a great job of not only contesting shots, and he definitely blocks a fair amount of shots, but he also knows how to contest shots without fouling. Does a great job of keeping his hands upright, which is kind of strange considering another aspect of his game where he does foul a lot. Well, I guess we'll talk about that later in the weakness portion of the video. But he does a great job of contesting shots at the rim without fouling, and again, that just bodes well for him being able to translate to the next level, right? When you consider that he's a plus point of attack defender, and then when you combine that with his ability as a weak side rim protector, being able not to foul and whatnot, that only adds to his strength. And he's also a great strong side defender as well. He doesn't necessarily you know, get in front of passing lanes all that well, but he loves to create turnovers as a strong side defender just off of picking off ball handlers, right? And again, that's bodes well for him. He's a guy who you can't necessarily attack on his side without accounting for him. And he's a guy who, as a weak side defender can make plays. So again, this only bodes well for his translation to the NBA level. And when you consider all these strengths, I view him as being a better defensive prospect from day one at the NBA level than an offensive prospect. However, that's not to state that I don't love his offensive game, and I think he has huge upside on that side of the floor. Moving on to some of my concerns with Ousmane Dieng. First up, I do want to talk about his shot form. And while his shot has definitely improved over the course of the season, and while he definitely does have a high release, I do worry about his shooting hand a little bit, as his elbow isn't necessarily bent all the way. Don't get me wrong, he definitely gets a good release on his shot. However, his shooting form is kind of like his elbow kind of sits like this a little bit, and sometimes I would just rather him get full extension on that elbow. I think it would only add to him being a more dangerous shooter, since it would make his shot even harder to contest, since his release would be even higher. And I think he's going to be a good shooter as he develops at the NBA level. However, I would definitely like to see that shooting hand be extended a little bit more as he continues to develop at the NBA level. And again, I think it would only add to him being a more dangerous, not only a self creator, but a spot up shooter, and also as a pick and roll creator overall. Again, as we just talked about, as just adding to him being a threat in pick and roll situations. Moving on to another part of his game that I think could definitely improve, it's just his decision making overall. I feel that at times he can be a bit indecisive, and what I mean by that is sometimes he'll catch, and it happens all the time. For those of us that have, or for anyone that has really played basketball, there's times where you catch the ball and you're kind of thinking like, okay, I want to do this, and this, or sometimes I want to do this, or you're just indecisive in general, and then you lead up, and then and then you end up traveling, right? And that just happens, a good amount of times for Ousmane Dieng. So again, he's 18 years old. He's a month older than me, so I mean he's still growing. I can only imagine being at the NBA level, and he's again a year older than me. Again, he's still growing into his body and whatnot. So I think he'll be fine, as he continues to grow, like IQ wise and whatnot. But it definitely will be something that you will see from him early on in his NBA career. There will be times where he can just travel or just make certain bad decisions, just because he's just a bit indecisive, has a lot running through his head. So once he gets comfortable at the NBA level, I see that being something that will I guess leave his game as he continues to grow, right? But another part of his game that I think could definitely use work is just his finishing. And I think he's a decent finisher, but I think there are definitely times where he can get an and one, and it's not necessarily finishing against guys that are his height or shorter. It's against taller guys, like those 7 foot rim protectors, where I would love to see him use his body and his length to kind of counteract their size, right? And there's times where he just goes up and he thinks that he's just bigger than them, and it just doesn't end up working out, right? Just because he's not bigger than them, right? So there are times where I would definitely like to see Ousmane kind of be able to use his body and use his length in order to finish over some of those taller defenders. And again, I expect that to be something. All these issues are just things that will grow or will hopefully develop as he gets older throughout his career. But again, he's just so young that these are just some of the blatant flaws in his game, in his offensive game. However, moving on to the defensive side of the floor, where he uses his hands like a lot. And what I mentioned before about how there are times where he can get beat by defenders where he has like good, not great foot speed. A lot of times he will try to just recover by keeping his forearm on them. And, that's just going to be a foul call at the NBA level. In just general, he's a very handsy defender. So I think that's definitely something that he is going to have to clean up at the NBA level, just trying not to foul as much as he does. And again, it's something that I think can definitely be worked on, but he has gotten into a fair amount of foul trouble throughout his career at the NBA and at the NBL so far because of his fouling issue. And I think that is something that he's definitely going to have to clean up in order to see the floor extensively at the NBA level. And then moving on to the final aspect of his game that I think could definitely improve is just his rebounding. I think he just ball watches on the glass, on the boards, way too much. There are times where a rebound, like Ousmane isn't grabbing a rebound unless it's directly at him. And I have seen certain plays, I'm looking at my notes as I speak on the side. There are times where I have notes where I'm looking at it now, where there's times where he can grab rebounds in traffic and you're like, okay, I want to see that more, right? And it's just something that he doesn't do enough. And I think it's probably because he's more so perimeter oriented at this point in his career. He's not necessarily, a bruiser. He's not a back to the basket player. He's not. He's. You can tell that he's always grown up with the ball in his hands out on the perimeter. So I think that's definitely plays a big issue in terms of his rebounding, his lack of rebounding, I should say. But I feel like as he grows, just given how big he is and how long he is, I feel like that's something that could definitely be emphasized in his development. Just being able to come down with boards, which could definitely help since he's a good ball handler, high IQ, can make passes in transition, being able to come down with a rebound, through traffic and being able to push the break would just add another wrinkle in Ousmane Dieng's game. Moving on to what I believe to be Ousmane Dieng's outlook at the NBA level. First up, I do want to talk about his floor, which I expect to be more than likely his role early on in his NBA career, which is an end of the rotation piece, maybe a spot rotation player here and there, and occasional G League minutes as well to prioritize his development. But if nothing else develops, then this will probably be his role at the NBA level. However, I highly doubt that. And the thing that would lead to this being his outcome as an NBA player would just be the shooting can be a problem. That shooting elbow being the main culprit in his shot not translating to the NBA level, and then the fouling never gets better. Doesn't necessarily get all that much stronger throughout his career, and he can never necessarily stay on the floor because he isn't the best of shooters, and the fouling is also an issue for him. So I don't expect this to be the outcome for Ousmane Dieng. However, I would be lying if it wasn't at the very least a possibility. But again, I don't think this will be the outlook for Ousmane Dieng's career looking forward. However, I do probably expect this to be his role from day one at the NBA level. Excuse me. Moving on to the median outcome, which is what I believe to be the most likely outcome for Ousmane Dieng's career, is that he's a good starter and a versatile two-way forward where, he can space the floor, knock down open shots, and then he can create a little bit for himself. Maybe the handle doesn't necessarily translate all the way, which can lead to him, not necessarily being the best of self-creators, but still being a solid self-creator in his own right. And then he's also a solid defensive player, still has some fouling issues, but a versatile point of attack defender who can also provide some value to a team as a help defender. And I expect this to be the most likely outcome for Ousmane Dieng's career. However, don't get me wrong, and I don't get me wrong, I would be lying if I told you that his ceiling wasn't much higher than this. As I state here, I think his ceiling is as a low level all star caliber player, where he can become a very good self creator, and ultimately a secondary initiator for an offense, where he can run your offense at some times, and he's able to not only create his own shot, but be able to open up lanes for other people, be able to find shooters out of pick and roll situations, be able to hit rolling big men and whatnot, just be a very effective self creator and a very effective pick and roll ball handler. And again, just be able to run your offense. And the fouling issue kind of rids itself over time, as his IQ develops and as his overall strength level develops. Which would allow him to stay on the floor a lot longer, and again, given that his IQ would be improving, would have improved at this time, maybe his strength a little bit, he would just be able to just be a very effective two-way player and ultimately a two-way star for whatever team he ends up on. And then for comparisons, I ended up with Paul George. I've seen that name being thrown out a little bit. I didn't want to be redundant, but I really felt like Paul George was a decent comparison for him ceiling-wise, just because Paul George is, a ball handling, secondary initiator who can create his own shot and find teammates sometimes. And that's ultimately what I believe Ousmane Dieng could look like in the future, a perimeter-oriented 6'9", 6'10" player. And I threw in shades of Chris Middleton for the same reason. I believe that all three of them kind of have, the similar roles, even though they score in different ways. Obviously Paul George is much better than Chris Middleton, but still, even though Chris Middleton is a star in his own right, but Paul George is just, a borderline Hall of Fame level player at this point in his career, right? But, they all are perimeter oriented, much bigger wings, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, I really like Ousmane Dieng. I think, again, the most median outcome for him is, being, a good starter at the NBA level. However, I would be lying if I told you there was an upside for him being an all-star caliber player if he hit his ceiling. And ultimately, right now, just given how good he's looked the past month and a half, I've moved him to being a middle of the first round level pick, and I think there's definitely upside for him being even higher by the time the draft fully comes around. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Ousmane Dieng in the comments. Do I have him rated about right as a middle of the first round pick? Do you guys think he should go even higher? Do you guys think he should go even lower, maybe even as a second round pick? Let me know what you guys think, as he's one of the more divisive prospects in this class. So let me know what you guys think about Dieng in the comment section. But aside from that, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have subscribed, please share the video with a friend. I want to keep growing the channel, keep growing the community that we have here. And again, aside from that, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and please take care. Peace.